Please be aware, in this podcast series we talk about all areas of safeguarding, which some people may find upsetting. So please make sure you're okay listening to today's topic. Be mindful of those around you, such as children, that you might not want to listen in. Hi, I'm SSS Safeguarding Director Sam Preston.
And I'm former head teacher and content author Sarah Spinks.
In today's podcast, we are unpacking a difficult truth. Child poverty in the UK has reached record levels. The latest government figures show us just how serious the situation has become. New data from the Department for Work and Pensions shows that 28% of children are living in low-income households before housing costs, and 31% after housing costs. And that's almost a third of all children in the UK.
And it's not just about income. 11% of children are now living in material deprivation, meaning families can't afford basics like warm clothes, food, or school essentials. As a former head teacher, I saw this firsthand year after year.
Reiterate that. I can reiterate that, Sarah. So 1 in 8 children now faces both low income and material deprivation. It's a double hit, and many of these families aren't what we would traditionally expect. Many of them are working, and they're just not earning enough to get by.
And I think that's such an important point. I lost count of how often I met families where both parents worked, but they were just still choosing between food and heating. Are we doing enough to challenge the idea that poverty only looks a certain way?
Yeah, I think absolutely, Sarah. Absolutely. I do think we need to challenge it. The report also highlighted 44% of children in low-income households live with a disabled family member. So that intersection between disability and poverty is huge.
Yeah, and it often means families are dealing with extra costs, more stress and fewer opportunities for support. How many times are those children falling behind simply because the system isn't designed to meet complex overlapping needs?
And I do have to say, it's not just this one report. The Resolution Foundation and Family Resources Survey backs it up. Child poverty and food insecurity have risen 3 years in a row. So that's an extra 100,000 children living in poverty and 300,000 using food banks.
And, it makes you ask, what are the long-term consequences for these children? Not just academically, but emotionally and socially too. We're talking about missed milestones, stunted opportunities and eroded self-worth.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, your time as a head teacher, did you see this changing over the years?
Oh, definitely. It became more hidden.
Yeah.
Uniforms might look okay, but the packed lunch is empty. The child is quiet, withdrawn, or constantly tired. The signs were subtle, but always there if you were looking. Too often we had to find workaround to support them with very limited resources.
And it sounds like it puts schools in a tough spot, especially when you add things like safeguarding concerns, mental health needs, family instability into the mix.
Yeah, and we were always trying to hold the line. How do you maintain high expectations while still showing compassion?
Yeah.
How do you avoid making assumptions or unintentionally adding stigma?
Yeah, that's really important. That's where this whole idea of a whole school approach to poverty awareness comes in, isn't it? Making sure everyone, from leadership to lunchtime supervisors, everybody understands the issues and knows how to appropriately respond.
Absolutely. And it's not just about having a hardship fund, it's about culture.
Yeah.
Are we making it easy for families to ask for help? Yeah. Are we training staff to notice the quiet indicators?
Absolutely.
And are we, creating those spaces where every child feels seen and supported?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's pupil premium funding. Are schools really able to use that money to address both learning needs and well-being?
And that was always the balance. How much do you spend on academic support versus things like uniform grants, mentoring or breakfast provision, You want it to go as far as possible, but the needs are often so wide-ranging.
And for schools wanting to support families more actively, what made the biggest difference in your experience, Sarah?
Without a doubt, building trust. Sometimes it was about changing how we communicated with parents, less formal, more human. Other times it was just offering support without asking for proof or forms, a warm coat given quietly, a school trip paid for without drawing attention. All those things mattered. Including things like wiping school lunch debt for parents that you knew had lost the job or they were just struggling, really, really struggling. And it was about knowing your parents and having that trust.
Yeah. It's clear. Yeah, I hear things all the time, for teachers that are buying things from their own money and whatnot. It's clear that schools are doing their best and they're trying to do their best. But we have to face that education settings, they can't really tackle child poverty alone.
No, and they shouldn't have to. Schools can mitigate, they can support, they can advocate. But the root causes, that's policy, economics and political will. And we need national strategies, not just school level firefighting that it sometimes felt like.
Yeah, speaking of which, there is talk of a new child poverty strategy coming in June 2025. But without bold moves like scrapping the two-child benefit cap, experts warn that poverty rates could keep rising.
And as someone who's seen the human impact, I agree. Why aren't we taking the steps? We know that would help. If lifting the cap could pull 700,000 children out of poverty, why wait?
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap up with this from our discussion. Poverty, it isn't just a financial issue. It's a safeguarding issue. It puts children at risk of neglect, exploitation, and long-term harm. It's not inevitable, but at the moment, our society's choices are shaping it.
Yeah, and as educators, whether we're in the classroom or not anymore, we all have a role to play. We all do need to keep noticing. We all do need to keep caring. And we all do need to keep raising our voices.
Absolutely. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with your team and let's keep pushing this conversation forward. Until next time, where I know this discussion always does make you feel a little bit gloomy, I think, but we do need to stay hopeful. We do need to stay active, and compassion in education is never wasted. So keep doing what you're doing.